What's up, all my movie loving maniacs? This your boy Bankful B of the Lassiter Factor, and from today here on out, I'm gonna start releasing best of lists on not just movies but other things here and there. Today it's basically music. Now I don't usually talk about music. I leave that to more qualified individuals, but this year music it was particularly interesting because my relationship within my adult life has been going up and down because I don't listen to music as frequently, or at least try to listen to everything as much as I used to. I just listen to it as I go. But this year in particular, it was pretty special because most of my favorite artists all came out with something, and I wanted to take a moment to highlight some of my favorite music from the year of 2024. At the beginning of the year, 21 Savage released American Dream. Now, I'll admit, I'm not a big 21 Savage fan, but he has made songs that I've enjoyed listening to. And I'd say this is the first album of his that I've actually listened to that I really enjoyed. And he's probably one of the few rappers in this current generation of rappers that I legitimately like. I just like the way he flows, I like the way he sounds, and I just like the way he just puts songs together. My favorite song in particular off this album is Red Rum. That song was everywhere. It's been memed to death, especially on TikTok. And plus, like I said, he's one of the few rappers that I like from this current generation, not named Kendrick, Cole, and dare I say Drake. Now, I'll admit, despite the fact that I think Kanye West has gone cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs over the past couple of years, and I think he's in his second place, I still think he's a musical genius. And this is probably one of my favorite projects of his that he has made since The Life of Pablo. And it's a collaboration album that he did with Ty Dolla $ign, which I'll admit, I'm not too deep into his music, but this song had great bangers like Keys to My Life, Talking, Back to Me, Carnival, Beg Forgiveness, and my personal favorite, Paid, which is my favorite Payday song. Now, I'll admit, I haven't given Vultures 2 a deep listen yet, but as for Vultures 1, a solid album, and like I said, to me, this is one of Kanye's best projects in years. Now, it's crazy talking about this after we just saw her perform during the halftime show of the game on Christmas Day. But I'll admit, I'm not part of the Beehive, but Beyonce, I mean, she's made songs that I've liked. In her Lemonade album, that was probably the first album that I actually listened to of hers from front to back. And then I liked the Renaissance album. And then she came out with a country album, or maybe some people don't consider it a country album. That's up to you to decide. But I listened to this album when it first came out, and it did have some solid bangers here and there, but I haven't particularly gone back to it yet. But after watching her perform at the halftime show, there are some songs that I do want to revisit. But I say this was a pretty solid country album, especially coming from me because I'll admit I listen to anything, but country music is my least favorite genre of music, and I'd say Beyonce did an excellent job here. And my standout track here is her rendition of Jolene. In all due respect to Dolly Parton, but I just prefer this version over the original version simply because Dolly Parton's version, it was just like, please, Jolene, don't sleep with my man. Whereas with Beyonce, she's just like, Jolene, if you sleep with my man, I'ma fuck you up. If Challengers is one of my top five favorite movies of the year, then its soundtrack is definitely my favorite soundtrack of the year. This is one of the best soundtracks I've heard in a long time. It's by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, and they were announced to be doing the soundtrack for Tron Eras, which comes out next year. And if you listen to this soundtrack, you can definitely understand why they were picked to do the soundtrack for that movie, and as a good way to basically top what, or not top, but follow up what Daft Punk did with the soundtrack to Tron Legacy. When I listen to this, it's not just great background music, it's also good on its own, and it actually does sound like video game music. Just pretend like it's a tennis game, and this is the music for it. Now, Justice is a techno or dubstep group that I recently discovered because they did a song called Never Ender with Tame Impala, which is one of my, well, if not my favorite band right now. I love Tame Impala, and I love them when they do collaborations like this. And then after just hearing that, I listened to the rest of this album, and I just vibe with this album. I just love how it sounds. I love how it's put together. I love something unique like this. But of course, my standout track from this album is Never Render. Lady Raven by Salika Shyamalan, which is basically the album made for M. Night Shyamalan's movie Trap, which was released last summer. I'd say this is probably my second favorite soundtrack of the year. Actually, no, I'll say third. My second favorite was probably Dune Part 2, which shout out to Hans Zimmer, great soundtrack. But this right here, it introduced me to her and her music. And whether or not you thought she worked in the movie or not, that's up to you to decide. But as far as her music she made for this movie, I thought it was excellent. The standout tracks for me here are Don't Want to Be Yours Anymore, Save Me, and Release, which that song was in all of the marketing for this movie. Now, I'll admit, I am a fan of Eminem and his music, but I don't think he's made a great album since Recovery back in 2010. And I'll give him Kamikaze, in which that album was a response to Revival. But here, I still don't think this is a particularly great album. I don't think it's one of his best, but it's still a pretty solid album, and it is nostalgic for a lot of people, especially the Slim Shady era of Eminem. And basically, this album, it wasn't also just a death of the Slim Shady persona, but it was also Eminem giving a big giant fuck you to cancel culture. And that's basically one of the themes of this album. But overall, the standout tracks to me on here are Renaissance, Toby, and Temporary, which is a great segue into his relationship with his daughter because, as we all saw throughout the year, his daughter got married after years of talking about his daughter in his music, and now here she is, she's getting married, and she's about to give birth, making Eminem a grandfather Shady, if you will, and I'm sending my praise and condolences to him as well because his mother recently passed away. But overall, it's good that he released this album because it really did make you reflect on Eminem and his journey here because through his daughter, man, talk about ending generational curses. Now I'm gonna make a part two because there's so much other music I'm gonna talk about that I don't think I can fit into this video. But yeah, stay tuned for part two.